Hello, welcome back to the Edge of the Box podcast, a podcast by WhoScored.com. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by WhoScored's very own Ben, and we've got Jonathan Wilson with us as always as well. Busy weekend of Premier League action coming up again, but we're going to start off with the Champions League. The semi-finals, of course, took place this week. And Ben, Vinny Jr., shout for arguably one of the best players in the world at the moment. He was the player of the week on Who Scored in the Champions League, wasn't he?
He was, yeah. So we'll go through the 11 initially, and then we'll sort of go back, swing it back round to Vinny Jr. We've got Courtois in goal. I've cheated a bit and put Kyle Walker at right back with Acerbi, Bastoni centre-backs and Camavinga left-back. It's a 4-1-3-2, so we've got Hakan Çalhanoğlu holding with Kevin De Bruyne, Henrik Mkhitaryan, Vinicius Jr. in support of Edin Dzeko and Lautaro Martinez. As Dan said, Vinicius Jr., player of the week. It is hard to look beyond him as probably the player of the season, best player in the world at the moment. You look at the players ahead of him, arguably Haaland, of course, but Vinicius Jr. is the best rated player in the Champions League for Who Scored. He's not quite up there in La Liga. I think Griezmann leads the way for that, but he's really developed his game to become this all-round world-class winger that just knows how to score every type of goal. He's a threat to any defence, and on current form, he'd have to be right up there.
Yeah, I won't ask too many questions about that team of the week. That midfield seemed very, very open to me. But Jonathan, Real Madrid's left-hand side, you've got Vinny Jr. running things down the flank, running at defenders, caused Man City a lot of problems. And then at left-back, you've got a young central midfield player in Camavinga, who literally looks like he's been playing left-back his whole life. He still does look a bit raw at times, but he's doing an exceptional job there. He's got a lot in his armourer.
Yeah, I think he's a brilliant player, but I much prefer him in midfield. And he's played there half a season. He's done really well there, and he's part of that growing trend of fullbacks going into the midfield. But I still think if you run at him, he looks like a midfielder playing at fullback. He's not a natural fullback. Now you can cover that up and you can get away with it, but I still think his long-term future. I hope his long-term future is in midfield because I think he's an absolutely brilliant midfielder. I think he's merely a very good left back. And I do wonder, I was a little bit disappointed that Guardiola didn't, that last sort of 10, 15 minutes, give Mahrez a run against him, just see what happened when he got a proper quick dribbler against him. I sort of understand that there was a, let's keep it at 1-1. But if City need a goal late on in the second leg, I think that's definitely an avenue they can pursue because Vinicius Jr. doesn't track back at all, which is part of the game plan that he stays high. So they've always got that outlet for counter-attack. Particularly when they play that sort of very lopsided 4-4-2 that they did on Tuesday. But they're two very, very good players. They combine very nicely, but I think defensively it's potentially exposable.
Yeah, we spoke last week about the array of options that Real Madrid are going to have in midfield next season. I guess long term, he may play. I imagine he'll probably play left back next season because of those array of options. But long term in his game, I think he will end up in midfield. But it's probably a good learning curve for him in a lot of ways to play left back, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think it never hurts players to be able to play in multiple different positions. Within reason. But I think learning how to see the game from a different point of view of the pitch, I think that can only be beneficial. Unless your form really suffers as a result, and it's obviously very useful for Real Madrid or France to have a player who can offer you cover in multiple positions.
I mean, there was, of course, another semi-final last night, but in all honesty, I don't think Milan seemed to realise that it was a derby game or a semi-final. So we'll move away from that and look to preview the Premier League like we always do. So we'll start with Leicester against Liverpool, the famous Peggy Arfexed derby, if anyone remembers him in goal for both teams on a few occasions. Leicester are in deep, deep trouble, Jonathan. It's a funny one, isn't it? Because Rodgers probably didn't really want to be there. Leicester didn't really want him. They stuck with him for so long through the season just to end up getting rid of him. So they may as well have got rid of him in the summer. Their squad's somewhat lopsided at times. If they go down, how many of their players would go on elsewhere and still be Premier League players, Jonathan?
Oh, a lot. And I think that's what must be so frustrating for Leicester, that it's not that this is a weak squad. It's a very good squad. I mean, they finished 8th last season. And the 2 seasons before that, is that true? Yeah, the 2 seasons before that, they finished 5th. So the last Deloitte report we've got, which covers 20 to 21, they were the 8th richest club in the Premier League by revenue, and they were finishing 8th. If you look at since they came up in 2014, they're averaging 56 points, which would be enough to finish 8th. So they should be finishing 8th. And you look at the points total since they came up, and everything's been within 12 points of that, apart from the season when they won the title, when they got 81 points. Well, this season, they're on 30 points, so they're 26 below. So if they get one more point in the last 3 games, they're the same amount below this season that they were above the season they won the title. So I sort of think they're sort of... if you think their baseline is 56 points, then the maximum you can gain from that maybe is 25, and the maximum you can lose from that is 25. Not many teams hit those maximums or minimums, but Leicester are doing so. But you look at the squad, and I think most mid-table Premier League squads, maybe or higher, will be quite happy with Maddison, Castagne, Barnes, Fass, Dewsbury Hall, Tielemans, Ndidi, Tete, Suter, Justin, Pereira, Christensen, Soyuncu, if he ever gets back to what he was before the Euros, which seemed to really addle his head. Even Amati and Mendy, I think there's plenty of promise there. So,
not Amati, come on.
Yeah,
not Daniel Amati.
Playing in midfield, I don't know why he's playing
midfield. Fair enough.
I think if he played in midfield, there's definitely something there. I'm not saying he's been playing well the last sort of 18 months or so, but there is something there. So yeah, they're in terms of sides down at the bottom, player for player, they're I'd say by some margin the best.
It's a strange one because you've reeled off all those names and they're really good players. But I guess the thing is, Ben, you've got all those good players. They haven't really found a settled 11 all season. I think they've had injuries at the back, which hasn't helped. But they're far too easy to play through, Leicester.
Yeah, and I think the absence of Ndidi for much of the season hasn't helped them. But I mean, you look at the list that Jonathan just rattled through, and it is a hefty list of players that are arguably too good to go down. You say that anyway on paper, but that's never the case in practice sometimes. And I mean, it's shocking to think they haven't kept a clean sheet since before the World Cup, which speaks of just their defensive issues at the back. I mean, they have no issues in scoring. James Maddison is sort of key to that. He's got 10 goals and 9 assists this season, and he's far and away the best rated player. But it's just the defensive issues, and I think the fact they didn't replace Kasper Schmeichel adequately has really cost them. Using Danny Ward from the outset at the start of the season hasn't helped, and bringing Daniel Everson in this stage of the season certainly, rocked the boat defensively. He should have been starting for them, in my opinion, ahead of Danny Ward. I think he's a much better keeper. But as you say, it's just injuries at the back, and crucially, the injury to Ndidi that has really cost them.
Yeah, but even when I watch Ndidi, he's not the player that he once was. I think Tielemans' mobility is a problem at times, even though he's an excellent footballer. I think his mobility is a problem at times in midfield.
But indeed, he had that knee surgery 2 years ago, gone January. And I'm not sure he's ever quite got back to the level he was at before that.
No, he's not. He's definitely not the same player. He used to be one of the most fearsome midfielders in the Premier League. Defensively, he was so difficult to get past, and he really held that midfield together for Leicester, and he allowed Tielemans and Maddison to go and do the things that they were good at, and they wouldn't look so troubled at the back as they do now. What do you think's next for James Maddison? I think we can safely say, even if Leicester stay up, Jonathan, with a year left on his contract, he's probably not going to be at Leicester next season. Asked you a similar question a few weeks ago on James Ward-Prowse. What's Maddison's level?
I mean, he's going to give a very similar answer to what I gave about Ward-Prowse. I guess he's slightly younger than Ward-Prowse, so maybe his ceiling is a bit higher. But the problem is it's very hard to know as an outsider how good he is at pressing. And until you know that, how capable he is of taking on board those tactical instructions. And I think we definitely have seen with England that Gareth Southgate's been sceptical of that. It's very difficult to tell, but is he a City player? No, I don't think he is. Could he play for any of the other 6 of the big 7, if we call him a big 7 now? Yeah, probably. All of them are imaginable. You'd think Liverpool probably are well enough stocked in terms of attacking midfielders or forwards that he wouldn't go there. It's not an area where you'd say Arsenal need to strengthen. Tottenham could do anything. There's not a play. There's not a position where it wouldn't be apart from maybe centre forward, but there's not a position where they couldn't sign a player who'd improve what they've already got. Newcastle, well, yeah, I think they probably do need a bit more creativity. I think when you're looking at the bench, your new option to bring on is Almiron. For all he had that purple patch early in the season, I think Maddison would be a step up from that, albeit a slightly different position. But that's an area where they probably need bolstering. Maybe they think that the fact that Isak can play on the left, that sort of covers that Maddison position. But I think it's certainly not impossible to see him at Newcastle. Manchester United have dozens of attacking midfielders, but none of them really seem to work apart from Rashford. So maybe there. But in terms of level, there's no reason why he shouldn't be that type of club. It's just that one doubt is his capacity to take on board complicated tactical instructions and press, and we sort of won't know that till it happens.
No, he's one of my favourite players to watch in the Premier League. I think he's a really, really good footballer. My question mark over him at the moment is probably durability.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
And also that I don't really know what his best position is. Not many teams seem to be playing with number 10s nowadays. So where does Maddison play? He's played a lot of football kind of on the right hand side, but inverted for Leicester, which I'm not sure gets the best out of him. Although his numbers are absolutely fantastic in terms of goals and assists. And actually, Ben, when you look at in terms of the best rated players in the Premier League, when you take out the top 7, he comes out on top, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's top with the 7.29, which, as you say, is top of the players when excluding the teams currently in the top 7. That's 12th overall. So it's clear that he's, effectively shouldering this attacking burden for Leicester. I don't know. I think it is difficult to see what his level would be. He's still only 25, 26 now. So there's still time to learn, a different side to his game that could see him maybe starting at Liverpool and set more central midfield role and number 8 role potentially with the license to get forward. He's someone who will still be playing in the Premier League next season, and deservedly so, even if Leicester do stay up. But all the more so if or potentially when they get relegated.
I mean, he's done his bit. His goal output in terms of numbers of goals and assists is pretty high, especially at a team that's sitting in the bottom 3 at the moment. But I'm the same as you. I'm not. But like you're a Spurs fan, Ben, for example. If Spurs got a new manager and moved away from this 3 at the back system, I suppose even if they stayed with it, would you take Maddison at Spurs? You'd be happy with him? Would he improve Tottenham in your opinion?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's obviously the question marks over Son and his consistency this season. Kulusevski hasn't looked the same player he was in the second half of last season, and Tottenham do lack the creativity from the central areas, in my opinion. I think if you can go to a 3-4-1-2 for Tottenham, if they do stick with a 3-man defence, he's perfect for that role behind the strikers. If that's Harry Kane or Son or Richarlison, you've got someone there who could have that freedom to move around in the final third to, put teams to the sword. Tottenham really haven't had that sort of player since Eriksen left. And he would be a welcome addition to Tottenham, in my opinion.
I think Tottenham or Newcastle are probably the 2 most likely places that he'll end up. He was linked with both last summer, actually, but obviously he stayed at Leicester for the season. I mean, this is a huge game for Leicester. Liverpool on top form at the moment, so it's not great that really Leicester need to win this game. They're really in the mire at the moment. But Jonathan, I suppose one plus for them is that Jamie Vardy has a sensational scoring record against Liverpool, and if Dean Smith's done one thing so far, he has reinvigorated Jamie Vardy.
Yes, I mean, but it's still not the Vardy of old, is he? He's still a couple of goals doesn't really change that. I think Vardy is better playing alongside another forward. I think that's quite a difficult thing to sort out when you've got Leicester's midfield as it is at the moment. That you think of them in the title season, he was playing alongside Okazaki. I think he's played well off Iheanacho, but Iheanacho's now injured. So as a sort of leader of a line, I don't think that's ever been his strength, but particularly now that the age has started to sap at him. But he's the sort of player who, in a crisis, has. He's somebody you would trust. He's somebody who kind of, I think, is capable of suddenly pulling out a big performance and getting a couple of goals. And And Liverpool's high line is obviously something he likes playing against because there's space in behind that his pace can take him into.
He's good at shouldering the burden, isn't he, Jamie Vardy? He can kind of carry the weight of a team on his shoulders, and he's done that with Leicester many times. I'm just thinking, Barnes has got good numbers this season as well. If Vardy can start scoring goals, and there's not much of the season left. Maddison's a good player. Leicester's real problem is in defence, because attacking wise, they have got good players and they should be doing more, but they can't defend, and that's what's cost them all season. You can't be conceding 5 at home away at Fulham. If you score 3 goals at Fulham, you should be winning that game, shouldn't you?
Was that directed at me or
anyone wants to chip in?
Yeah, I mean, it's been the problems for 2 years really. I mean, particularly from set plays. The defensive is just not good enough, and you sort of thought bringing Suter might help that. But to an extent, it is injuries. Like, if you're a fullback, don't go anywhere near Leicester because you will get cropped.
Yeah.
I mean, Ryan Bertman's played 4 games, I think.
Something like that. It's not a lot.
Or maybe it's 4 league games. Vestergaard just didn't work out for whatever reason. Not a fullback, I know. Sorry, but I'm talking generally about the defence. Johnny Evans has been out for ages. Soyuncu's form's fallen off a cliff since the Euros. But then going back to the fullbacks, Justin's been out for however long. Pereira's
injured,
missed huge chunks. Castagna's only just come back, I don't know, 5 or 6 games ago. Yeah, I think the way that they were unable to stop being bad at defending corners doesn't speak well of Rodgers. But equally, if you've got half a dozen defenders out all the time, that's really difficult. So I have a certain sympathy there, but yeah, defensively, and of course the goalkeeping situation doesn't help that. When you've had somebody as sort of dominant and vocal as Kasper Schmeichel, to lose him, and I don't think, I mean, whether it's Ward or Everson, to be honest, I know Everson had that very good game the game before last, but I don't think either of them are really up to it. I don't think either of them are Premier League keepers, and that's obviously a massive issue. Yeah,
they were linked with Dubravka, weren't they, in the summer? But Brendan Rodgers decided to go with Danny Ward, and I don't like to pick on goalkeepers, but he's never looked comfortable. Danny Ward, he doesn't seem to have the presence, and like you say, when you're following someone like Kasper Schmeichel, I'm not sure Everson's the answer either, but at least he's younger, and he'd come off the back of a really good season on loan at Preston. They just didn't get the defence and the goalkeeper sorted, and by the time they've kind of band-aided it, it's too late, and they're, like I say, they're really, really in the mire. Ben, Liverpool, though, is the top 4 in their hands now. They've gone on this ridiculous run. Manchester United and Newcastle have stumbled and dropped points at times. Liverpool just keep going, and we're at the point now where you probably wouldn't bet against them sneaking into the top 4 because they've done it before as well.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at momentum coming into these final weeks of the season, it's very important. And to have won 6 on the trot is hugely impressive, especially when their midfield still have their issues. And it is, to an extent, you can only win your final games and hope for the best. But with United slipping up, particularly on the road, you wouldn't bet against Liverpool leapfrogging them into that top 4 spot. Obviously, United have that game in hand. But this is the key stage of the season where Liverpool know how to get the job done. They had that wobble a couple of seasons ago where they weren't as consistent as they have been previously. But again, they ended the season strongly. So they've been in this position before. And it's just a case of whether Newcastle are able to hold their nerve in the final weeks of the season to secure their top 4 spot. They haven't been in this position for a very long time. United, they have been in this position. But again, it's unfamiliar territory for Ten Hag. And with the team currently as ruthless as Liverpool breathe down your neck, it's really hard to kind of shake the psychological edge that like Liverpool do have the psychological edge over both those teams above them. So to an extent, it is definitely in their hands. It wouldn't surprise me if Man United or Newcastle slipped up to allow Liverpool to the top 4.
Yeah, I mean, all Liverpool are missing at the moment is an Alisson header from a corner, to be honest, because it's so reminiscent of a couple of seasons ago. Who do you think?
No, I just don't think it is.
Do you not?
Well, they've won 6 in a row, but they battered Leeds, fair enough. Then they've won 5 games by a single goal, which is Forest, West Ham, Spurs, Fulham, Brentford. It's just an easy run of fixtures.
But these were the things they weren't doing earlier on in the season.
Yeah, but I don't think they're playing particularly well. And they've got Liverpool have got Villa to play at home, and then Southampton away. So all right, they should win at Southampton. Villa's a hard game. United's 4 games, and they've already got a point advantage, don't forget. United's 4 games, Wolves at home, surely they'll win that. Bournemouth away, if Bournemouth are getting beat off Lampard's Chelsea, surely United will win that. Chelsea at home, they should win that. Fulham home, they should win that. So, I mean, if United lose it from here, then that's an absolutely catastrophic end to the season for them. Who've Newcastle got left? It's I know it's slightly trickier than that, but they've got Leeds, then Brighton at home, Leicester at home, Chelsea away. So yeah, I'd be surprised if Liverpool sneak in. I think we've left it too late.
I guess it's a positive for them that they're ending the season well. They've still got some work to do in midfield, Jonathan, but they've got those attacking options. Again, now I just want to ask you about Darwin Núñez, because Liverpool are a team that they're not frugal, that's the wrong word, but they're careful, let's say, with how they spend money. They spent £85 million on a striker there. Did they really need him when they needed to address midfield? Did they really need Darwin Núñez? Especially now they've gone in and bought Gakpo as well.
Yeah, possibly not. And I think there's a lot of sort of, and if it's the kind of thing, it's almost impossible to unpick, but there's a lot of whispers come out of Liverpool that he was very much a Klopp signing, that the transfer committee that had done so well over the previous 7 years, that they've been cautious about that. And there's been a whole load of departures behind the scenes at Liverpool, Michael Edwards most notably, but others as well. And who knows? I mean, the story is Michael Edwards is tired and wants a year off, and he's been very sort of resistant to other offers. So that looks, we can probably take it at face value. Others leaving, are they thinking something similar? It's very difficult to tell, but certainly there are credible rumours. I'm not saying I necessarily believe them, but they're not rumours you sort of just laugh off. That there is some kind of conflict's too strong a word, but disagreements there within Liverpool's recruitment, and Núñez, I think, is sort of the manifestation of that. There's that piece that Ian Wright on Match of the Day. It's a week on Saturday, where he kept on saying, "Oh, look at all the positions he gets in," and he showed this clip, and Ian Wright was saying this is him being a really good player, and fair enough, it does show him getting into positions. Then it shows him just missing chances appallingly.
His finishing's not good. And
you sort of think, well, yeah, okay. At Benfica, he suddenly, his goals per season suddenly leapt in that last season. That he had, I'm not even sure he'd been a 10-goal a season man, and suddenly he's a 20-odd goal a season in that final season there. And then you wonder, well, does that mean it might click, or does it mean that actually the true him was the him not scoring many goals before that? And you sort of seen that with Timo Werner, that Timo Werner suddenly had that one season at Leipzig where he got 30 goals. But nothing in his career before that suggests he was a 30-goal a season man, and nothing in his career since. And I don't really know with Núñez. And he's such a weirdly sort of cumbersome, ungainly player. I don't know. His movement clearly is very good because he does keep getting in those positions. And that I guess, is the big plus. But there's technical stuff to his game that you really worry about. And there's also that oddity. He's a really good volleyer of a ball and pretty bad kicking a ball on the ground. And you'd think that kicking the ball on the ground is easier, but somehow it doesn't seem to be for him.
I find both hard in all honesty. But yeah, he's such a weird player because his movement is good, and people talk about this chaos that he creates. If you're spending £85 million on a striker, I want you to be putting the ball in the back of the net now, not in a few years' time. And I don't want chaos. I want you to score. He missed last week.
He's a sort of player who sort of seems, if you're a goal behind with 20 minutes to go and you want somebody just to sort of break up the rhythm of the game, to just make something different happen, he's a perfect player to bring on. But as you say, £85 million for that seems like a lot. Because you look at that forward line, if you've got Diaz, Gakpo and Salah, that looks nice. It looks really balanced. There's no sort of players out of position there, or Jota playing, well, actually any of the three positions. It's sort of, where does he fit in that? Because he is sort of a very different type of player. But that's, as we've seen with City, a little bit of grit in the oyster can create the pearl.
Nice.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Very Eric Cantona. that was Jonathan. Let's talk a little bit about Trent before we move on to the next game. Then Ben, what have you made on his new role?
Yeah, it's not really surprising. I mean, his defensive shortcomings have obviously been exposed time and time again. So the best thing to do is sort of get him further forward and do what he does best, and that's create chances for his teammates. And that's translated to 6 assists since that Arsenal draw, where that kind of became obvious from then that Klopp was moving Alexander Trent into a more midfield role. And, you know, you can't say start in central midfield because it comes back to the Camavinga situation that Jonathan spoke about earlier in the show. But it's a way to maximise his chance creation, and it's clearly having a positive effect on Liverpool as they head into the final weeks of the season.
You say he can't play midfield. The modern fullback does these things now. I get that, but I don't think this is that clever. I've noticed that Konate keeps picking up bookings, and because he's having to pull across and get himself wider in defensive situations because Trent gets caught up the field. Why can't they just play him in midfield, Jonathan? Because he'd probably be better than a lot of their midfield options. Why can't they let's buy a right back in the summer and move Trent into midfield? Because I think he'd be a sensational midfield player.
Well, that's the thing. They don't have any other right backs, do they?
Gomez is okay there, but long term, you'd want to buy one. But is it that clever making him just pull him so far out of position? Is it that clever?
Well, I mean, a lot of teams are doing this now, aren't they? Moving fullbacks into midfield. City have done it, obviously. Real Madrid are doing it. Their results have improved since he started doing that. That's clearly true. My sort of concern about him in midfield is his crossing is so good. Do you want to lose that? And I sort of think if their pressing was better, and I think everything with his defensive issues comes down to if Liverpool's pressing isn't good, the thing that gets exposed is Alexander Arnold's defensive capabilities, and that's what happened 2 seasons ago. You think of that game when they lost at away to Real Madrid, and I think the first 2 goals in that game, both in the first half, were Toni Kroos having hours to measure passes and just popping them over Alexander Arnold's head. That's not Alexander Arnold's fault. That's the press isn't preventing Kroos measuring that pass, which is what it should be. So if they get the pressing as good again as it was last season, then I sort of think that hybrid role, because he is a really good attacking right back, and he is good enough to play in midfield, and having him centrally means that he can use his range of passing, and it maybe is a way of using that range of skills. Otherwise, you have to bring in a right back. You probably play him on the right side of the midfield 3, so you can still pull wide. You can go outside Salah to get crosses in, and that might also work. But I do wonder. This is always my concern about fullbacks playing in midfield. Is when you're a fullback or a centre back, you're used to having the whole game in front of you. You're used to being able to see everything. When you're making a run forward, you're moving at pace by the time you're getting involved in the action, which is a huge advantage. Can you adjust to not doing that, to having to be a bit more static when you're receiving the ball? Maybe he can, I don't know. But that I think is always the doubt. And that for me would be the difference between a player who's a fullback who can move into midfield or a midfielder.
I mean, I get now that very much in football you have an on the ball and an off the ball system. I understand that, but this is not kind of what Man City do with their defenders when players come inside. Like when Lewis has played and he's playing right back, but then he comes inside and he sits next to Rodri. This isn't that. This is giving your right back a free role to go wherever he wants. And I think you're saying about Liverpool's fixtures, and in some games they have got a little bit lucky that they've not been caught out. I think if they do that against a really good team, I think there could be problems defensively because, like I said, Konate's got pulled a bit all over the place in certain games. And if you're playing against a really good team, I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah, I agree. And you see Guardiola doesn't do that against really good teams. Yeah, when against Real Madrid, against Bayern, he plays Walker at fullback or Akanji at fullback, and Stone steps forward from centre back which is a much more natural and easy progression. You're very used to the idea now of the holding midfielder stepping back. Well, why shouldn't the central defender step up? And it's obviously a much less disruptive thing because you're not asking a player to break the lines laterally, they're just breaking it longitudinally, which is a much more sort of, if you go back to the origins of total football, I don't, there's a lot of guff talked about, all the players interchanged all the time. No, they didn't. They had very set patterns of interchanging where you had a 1-3-3-3. The libero had a sort of free role to sort of cover gaps and maybe step up in possession. But the players who interchanged were right back, right midfield, right wing, and they changed longitudinally. They didn't change laterally. Centre back, centre midfield, centre forward, they could interchange. Left back, left midfield, left wing could interchange. But you didn't get the left midfielder swapping with the centre midfielder. You might because of where the ball went and where runs have taken you, but that was never part of the plan. So I think you're right. I think that's stepping from full back into midfield, that diagonal movement, it is a risk. And I think it's interesting Guardiola doesn't do that in the big European games, that he has Stones in the middle stepping up from there, which seems a safer way of doing it.
I mean, you're completely wrong about the total football. I don't know whether you've been watching Ted Lasso, but everyone starts with everyone. That's what happens. The modern manager like Ted Lasso. That's what happens, Jonathan.
I mean, Ted Lasso. Which book, which has been featured regularly in the
your
series,
book is on every week. Coach Beard never stops reading your book.
Yeah, so if his inspiration's coming from that.
Any royalties from your book being on Ted Lasso every week? Do you get?
I get money from the sales from that. I mean, it's perfect product placement, right?
Is he done well for you? It being on.
It's very difficult to tell, but there has definitely been an improvement in sales since Ted Lasso became a thing.
Really, that's interesting. Yeah. Interesting. I do laugh every time I see your book. There, he loves that book. Coach Beard.
I've been interviewed about it by both Sports Illustrated and the Boston Globe.
Really?
Which is like, surely there's bigger things happening in America than.
I will say as well, he started reading this book in the first episode of Series 1, and we're now into Series 3, and he's still
first scene of the whole thing.
Yeah, and he's still reading it now.
Yeah, he's got loads of notes in it though, hasn't he?
Why has he not finished this book yet?
No, he's going back. He keeps going back to absorb further lessons. Yeah, you can see he's finished because he's got his post-it notes everywhere.
I can imagine. Does Pep read it? Does Klopp read it?
I doubt it.
We'll never know, Jonathan. They might do. You may be inspired all kinds of managers, and that's what it's based on in Ted Lasso. We've spent way too long talking about Ted Lasso and way too long speaking about this game.
That book, incidentally, is called Inverting the Pyramid, and it's a new edition is out on June the 8th.
I think I got the new. Oh no, I've got the previous edition. So I haven't got the first edition. I've got whatever the last edition was. I bought it. I've not read it. I will read it though. I will. Read it. You don't care if I read it or not.
No, just buy it. Buy the new one.
Yeah, I might do. I might do it and send it to you to sign and sell it for millions one day. Let's get score predictions then for Leicester Liverpool. Jonathan, author, come to you first.
2-1 to Liverpool.
2-1 to Liverpool. Ben?
3-1 to Liverpool.
3-1 to Liverpool. I'll just go 4-1 to Liverpool. Why not? Let's see what happens. Next, we're going to look at Aston Villa against Tottenham. And this must be one of the first times we've done Villa this season. I don't remember getting to talk about my own team very much this season. Jonathan, the European picture for Europa League / Europa Conference football, Villa very much in the mix, which would have been unheard of when Steven Gerrard was in charge. I don't think even the most ambitious Villa fan would have particularly seen this coming. How do you see that now? Because I feel like Brighton are probably going to get 6th, and it's a straight shootout between Villa and Spurs for 7th in Europa Conference League football.
I think that's probably true, and certainly if I were anything to do with Villa, that's how I'd be thinking about it. But Brighton have a pretty tough run in, and I think they're showing signs of fatigue. I mean, that defeat to Everton on Monday was a very bizarre game. So I don't think it's totally out of the question that Villa could catch Brighton. But yeah, I mean, Spurs are the ones who look vulnerable, and particularly given that Villa are playing Spurs and they're 3 points behind, so they can pull level if they win this. Is that right? Yeah, and presumably their goal difference is better than.
No, it's not. Spurs is better.
Well, yeah, if you win 2-0, though, it goes level, right? So
yeah, it's close. Could have done with Liverpool hammering Spurs the other week rather than letting them back in the game, I think.
Yeah. So I know Villa have obviously had their little wobble as well, but I still think, if Villa win this, I think they should finish above Spurs, and I think they probably deserve to finish above Spurs, given how the season's gone.
Villa's fixtures are interesting because they've got Tottenham this weekend at home, then Liverpool away the weekend after, and then they finish against Brighton at Villa Park. So all these 3 games, they're all big games, aren't they? They're all teams that are playing for something and playing for Europe. Not often that happens at the end of a season, but this is a huge game against Tottenham at the weekend. Of course, Villa have won their last 5 at home and haven't conceded. Tottenham haven't won in 6 away. Ben, how do you feel going into this one?
Not confident at all. Although I say that ahead of every Tottenham game, just not confident. Obviously, things have improved since Mason took over, but it's just Tottenham are just muddling through to the end of the season. So it's just that I think confidence and on the fan base, confidence on the team is probably quite low at the moment. So it wouldn't surprise me if Villa did win this one.
Let's hope so. Let's fingers crossed. That's what the whole world wants to see. Villa have had a couple of difficult games. Jonathan lost their last 2 1-0. But I suppose Manchester United and Wolves, the 2 of the harder places to go. I didn't realise that Wolves had kept 10 clean sheets at home this season, and Manchester United, I think, have only conceded 8 at home this season. So although Villa have stumbled a bit in recent weeks after their 10-game unbeaten run where they won 8, the 2 places they have stumbled at are difficult places to go.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And also, I think it's unreasonable to expect a team to just sort of keep on winning. To take 26 points from 10 games is a great achievement. If there's a slight reset after that in as you say, difficult away fixtures, it's not a great surprise. It doesn't mean that Emery's suddenly a fraud or anything. It's just winning runs always come to an end eventually, and often one defeat leads to another. I wouldn't be too worried about either of those. I mean, the fact that Wolves obviously is a derby as well. I mean, is it a derby you take seriously? I don't know. Is it?
It's one that the Wolves fans care about. The other Midlands teams care more about beating Villa than Villa care about beating them. But obviously, Villa want to win. You want to win a derby game, and Villa would have took great pleasure from tripping up Wolves.
But Birmingham would be your big rival.
Birmingham's the big one. Yeah, that's the one. There's hatred there, pure hatred.
But there's just that extra sort of random factor of a even a minor derby. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about that. I know Watkins has stopped scoring, but again, if you score loads of goals in a row, eventually it comes to an end, and there's a bit of a what do you call it? A thingy to the mean. What's the word I'm looking for? Regression to the mean. Sorry.
Sorry.
So yeah, it wouldn't concern me too much.
Where does he sit in England terms? Watkins in England strikes the pecking order, do you think?
Well, I think at the moment he's definitely the first choice, second choice to Kane.
Do you think?
Yeah, I'd say so. As a central striker, Calvert-Lewin played really well, I think.
But Tony?
Starting to go. Well, yeah, I mean Tony maybe, but there's a whole thing about him going to get a ban. So
yeah,
I think there's a caution there. Yeah, I mean, it's. Yeah, I suppose that Tony's ban had sort of weighed the scales against him, but I guess if he didn't have a ban, maybe it would be the other way. But I don't think it's obviously Tony. I'd probably still go Watkins, just as being more similar to in style to Kane, in that he can work across the forward line, he can drop deep, whereas Tony I think is much more of a sort of focal point striker.
I mean, Watkins, he was never going to continue scoring. This is the problem, isn't it? He was scoring every single week, and it's just never going to continue. So you go a few games without a goal, and people start to ask questions again. But he's had a great season, and he's a great player. Ollie Watkins has been really good for Villa, and the way Emery's honed his game and changed certain things has been really good to see. And he seems to thrive off being the main man as well. The run of goals has come since Danny Ings left the club, and he became really the only striker. So he seems to thrive on the responsibility of being that main man and knowing he's going to be the person that's going to play. Ben, Ryan Mason steadied the ship, although it still looks a bit ropey for Tottenham. Would you be happy if Ryan Mason was appointed permanently? Would Spurs fans be happy with that?
So this is the conundrum. So I think a lot of Tottenham fans, have a lot of time for Ryan Mason. He's very highly thought of at the club, but it's just a case of whether this is maybe a bit too soon for him. It's just the issue now is that if he doesn't stay or doesn't get appointed manager, will he stick around to that coach role, or will he go out apply his trade elsewhere? I don't know if Spurs fans would be happy. I think it would be a case of steadying the ship until for 12 months or so. He should have been appointed in the interim instead of Stellini in the first place anyway. That decision was incredibly bizarre. It's a tough one because he is highly thought of at the club and the fans do like him, but it just feels as though he's not quite ready yet to take on the full, the permanent managerial position. I mean, you could have said the same about Gary Neal at Bournemouth. He didn't feel like he was ready, but he signed an 18-month deal back in November.
Bournemouth to managing Tottenham, though, I would say. Very different.
It is, yeah.
You can't. He needs to go and manage somewhere else first, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You can't just have Spurs as your first job. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, and I think if Tottenham, Nagelsmann is still a favourite, and I think if Tottenham don't get Nagelsmann now, they don't think they ever will. I don't think Tottenham fans would be happy. I also don't think they'd be annoyed if they stuck with Mason, but for the most part, it's leaning towards more that, you want to go with Nagelsmann ahead of Mason, which is completely fair enough.
And he did change some things last week, Jonathan. Is it a coincidence that Spurs won 1-0 against Palace, kept a clean sheet without Hugo Lloris? And I'm more aiming this at probably Eric Dyer.
I mean, neither Lloris nor Dyer have played well recently. I don't know. I mean,
it's not fit for purpose at Spurs' defence, is it?
I mean, so little at Spurs is fit for purpose. So I'm always very reluctant to scapegoat individuals. Neither of them have played particularly well the last sort of 2 or 3 months. But equally, were they the cause of a decline, or are they symptoms of a decline? And I think certainly with Dyer, I think they're symptoms of a decline. Lloris, I think possibly is getting towards the end. But again, that's something that Tottenham should be big enough to recognise and ameliorate. So, I mean, should Mason take over? I don't know. I'd love to believe that he'd be sort of a British Guardiola, sort of somebody with almost no experience who turns out to be a genius. But he's 31 with very limited. We just don't know. I mean, people around the club will see what he's like with players and how diligent he is and how inspirational he is. But there's nothing I've seen of what he said in press conferences or post-match interviews or anything like that makes me think he's got anything like the vision of a Guardiola. I mean, he does. So I think he needs to either go somewhere else to prove himself or be a much more sort of visible number 2 at Spurs before maybe taking over. I think to appoint Mason now, it would just look like Daniel Levy couldn't find anybody cheap enough. That would be the way it would be read. And whether that's fair or not, what it means is if you have a couple of defeats in August, suddenly the mood is as bad as it was under Nuno, and that's the last thing they can afford. So if you bring in somebody exciting from the outside, whether that's a Nagelsmann or Arne Slot or whoever, at least there's a sense of an exciting new project, and maybe there's going to be some pitfalls. Maybe it doesn't start well, and then that can carry over a couple of defeats. But I just think Mason, the first sign of trouble, the trouble would be very big.
Yeah, if they were going to give him the job, surely it would have been when they hired Nuno, and it was clear that they couldn't get anyone in, so they ended up hiring Nuno. Surely it would have been then that they gave Mason a chance.
He is 2 years older now, and when he was 29, then 2 years is 12% of his life. That's quite a lot.
Yeah, they can't give the job to Ryan Mason. I really like Ryan Mason. I actually liked him as a player as well. I thought he was a good player, but you can't be giving him the management role at Spurs at this stage of the career. There's too much to take on there. There's too much going wrong at Spurs. There's too much going on, and there's too much.
Yeah, that's
behind the scenes
obvious,
as well.
That's the other obvious massive difference to Guardiola at Barcelona. That they had a functioning system. They won the Champions League 2 years earlier. They had a structure in place, which Tottenham just don't.
I mean, talking of functioning systems, Ben, Emerson Royal, right centre back last week. I never thought I'd say the day. I think Porro had a really good game with Emerson Royal behind him. Actually, I quite like the look of Porro, but I didn't think I'd ever see a time where Emerson Royal was playing as a centre back.
Well, funnily enough, before he got injured, a lot of Tottenham fans were saying that perhaps he should be the right centre back with Romero pushed into the middle. He's defensively good. I wouldn't say he's great. Obviously, he's still very reckless, but that'll come with experience and in time. But it masks his attacking shortcomings because he can't attack for love nor money, but defensively he's pretty sound, and he has the sort of nous and the physicality to play that right centre back role to a good standard, and that would allow Porro to get forward and do what he does best in the final third. So I'm all for Emerson Royal playing right centre back for now and forever, because I think it's a system that probably works best for him and for Tottenham if they do stick with a 3-man back line.
Was his agent touting him for Real Madrid a few weeks ago as well? Or did I dream that? Have I imagined that?
It might have been his dad. It was his dad or his agent. I can't remember which one, but he said he's happy at Spurs, which is bizarre. So yeah, keep it Tottenham.
Yeah, I certainly don't think you'll be going to Real Madrid anytime soon, Emerson Royal. I wouldn't get your fingers crossed for that one. Before we do the just a minute section, let's have a quick word on the title race, Jonathan.
Do we want score predictions or?
Oh no, forget. Oh, to be fair, I've missed two things there. Actually, I've missed score predictions and the combined 11. So yeah, let's do the combined 11. Interested. I don't think I've ever seen Villa on this show in a combined 11. So let's go. We're gonna mix it up, Jonathan. We're gonna come to you first. What combined 11 have you chose?
10 Villa players and Kane.
Really? 4-4-2?
Well, no. So 4-2-3-1. So Buendia playing behind Kane with McGinn and Ramsey wide, and Dendoncker and Douglas Luiz back in midfield.
Okay. Kamara's back. No,
is he back? Okay.
He could have had.
Okay, I didn't know he was back. Sorry.
Kamara's. So you're picking 10 Villa players?
Yeah, Tottenham are terrible.
I think. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, but I mean, yes. They are. I'd probably do it a slightly different way. I'd probably go 4-4-2 like Emery plays and have Kane and Watkins as the strikers, and then pick the rest as Villa. Ben, I'm guessing WhoScored have probably done 10 Tottenham players and one Villa player.
No, it's 6 Tottenham players to 5 Villa players. We're up on 4-4-2.
How?
Because Tottenham are higher in the league than Villa, so that's how we'll do it.
Not by much.
We're a better team. Tottenham are a better team than Villa. 100%.
I'm not sure about that, Jonathan.
No,
would you go along with that, Jonathan?
Even I don't agree with that.
Well, it depends what our timescale is, but if you're asking me to pick a team to play a game this afternoon, which I assume is what we're doing,
yes, that is the remit.
Then what Tottenham did in September is not that relevant.
No, go on then, Ben. Let's have a look at the year 11. Well, WhoScored 11.
We've got Emi Martinez in goal, back four Pedro Porro, Christian Romero, Tyrone Mings, and Ivan Perisic. Midfield is John McGinn, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, Douglas Luiz, and Son Heung-min, and then Kane and Watkins up front. So 4-4-2, Emery would like that, and that's the end of that. No more discussion.
How has Ivan Perisic been chose over Morena at left back? Alex Morena. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, Morena's been really good for Villa.
Yeah, he has been very good, but I mean, Perisic has been sneaking up the assist charts as well, which has boosted his numbers. He's got 8 assists this season.
Has
That's boosted his. Yeah, I know. I'm as shocked as you are. So
he's not really a left back either, I would argue.
No, neither is Pedro Porro. So, but I mean, we'll get torn to shreds, but we'll look good going forward, I'm guessing. So we'll stick with that.
I'm not sure I can agree with some of the things that I've heard there. Let's have score predictions then. Ben, let you go first.
1-0 to Villa.
1-0 to Villa. I'll go 2-1 to Villa. Jonathan?
Yeah, 2-1 Villa.
I mean, Son only has to look at the goal at Villa Park and he seems to score. That's a little bit of a concern, even if he is slightly off the boil at the moment. As I said before, I made a mistake. Let's look now at the title race briefly. Jonathan, you called weeks ago that the title race was over. I'm sure you're still going to go with that.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to Arsenal, they've stayed in it longer than I thought they might. I thought there was a possibility they might completely collapse. And they were very, very good at Newcastle last week. I thought it was a really high quality, good game. And had they lost that, there was a possibility that the title race could have been done on Sunday if City had won and Arsenal had lost. But that's now not the case. And I guess from Arsenal's point of view, what they had to do was after they had that run of 4 games without a win, what they had to do was just make sure that if City slipped up, they didn't let them off. I mean, that would be the unforgivable thing for Arsenal now. Would have been, say City do slip up against Everton this weekend, and let's not forget that they are playing Everton, aren't they? Yeah. That Everton did get a point at the Etihad. If Arsenal, hadn't sort of made that tell, if they hadn't made that count, if they'd lost at Newcastle last week, then that would have been the thing. I think that it would have really sort of eaten at them in the future. Whereas now you can say that there's that 3 games of draws and then got hammered at City, and that's maybe a bit more understandable. So yeah, they and it's sort of just good, I think, going forward to sort of show that they are capable of performance like that against teams they'll be battling with next season for Champions League qualification. So just to show that it wasn't sort of a freak that first or 2/3 of the season.
I mean, in the most basic form, you would say draws at Liverpool and West Ham can happen, and they're not necessarily bad results. I think they'll look back at that Southampton game though and think, God, if only we'd
well,
there.
They dropped 4 points against Southampton this season, which
it's not good. Is it?
Not many teams have done that.
No, they haven't. Not many teams have done that at all. The slight change recently has been that Kivior played centre back instead of Holding, and he looked a little bit more astute, hasn't he, Jonathan?
Yeah, he has definitely. Yeah, I mean, I remember talking about that signing a few weeks ago and sort of saying I found it slightly odd when Holding looked slightly out of place that this Poland international, albeit one who signed from Spezia, wasn't getting a look in. I assumed that he'd arrived in training and just didn't quite look Premier League ready. But what we've seen in the last 2 or 3 weeks suggests he was ready. Now maybe he just needed that extra time to bed in. I guess there's a logic in sticking with, initially with going with the experienced player, sticking with what you know, and then I guess you don't want to drop him immediately and sort of that would scapegoat him, and then sort of do you give Kivior his debut away at City? That would also seem a dangerous thing to do. So I guess there is some logic to it, but they have looked better since Kivior came in, definitely.
I guess he's also very much, I wish I could stop saying I guess today, I've said it about 1,000 times. He's a left-footed centre-back, isn't he? So he's playing on the wrong side.
Yeah,
there's probably a reluctance to put him in because for that reason. But actually, I think he's adapted to that quite well, kind of playing on the wrong side, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I'm never that sure what the problem with playing on the wrong side is. I mean, John Terry did it throughout his career.
Yeah, plenty of it seems to be when the left footer plays on the right that it seems to become a debate because there's plenty of right footers that play left centre back and no one ever says anything.
I know it's partly to do with distribution out from the back. That's obviously that if you're right footed playing on the right, your natural sweep is to play the ball infield. You don't have to sort of turn your body very far to play it out to the fullback. But does that make a massive difference in modern players who are technically accomplished? I don't know. I mean, it would have made a difference to a 1970s centre back, but they wouldn't have been passing out from the back anyway. So, which I guess is why it happened. But I don't know. Nothing I've seen of Kivior makes me. I've seen a huge amount of him, but nothing makes me think he is sort of clumsy in that regard. So, it would be wrong to sort of say it was a desperate mistake not to play him earlier. But I think at the end of the season, when you're doing your accounting, you might think, that's something that's a decision that Arteta might have made differently, that might have made a positive difference.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens this weekend. Of course, 2 big games in the title race. Plenty of big games this weekend. Let's look at the just a minute section. Jonathan, we're going to start with you, and it's Leeds v Newcastle as Sam Allardyce plays against one of his many old teams.
Yeah, so Leeds really in big trouble. Second bottom, 2 points from safety. They've only taken 1 point from the last 6. And after this game, they've got West Ham, another one of Allardyce's old teams, and Tottenham. There'll be some encouragement, I think, to be drawn from the second half at City. They did tighten up there, but playing Newcastle is very difficult, even after Newcastle's defeat last week. They're still third, 3 points clear of Liverpool with a game in hand. They've got Brighton, Leicester, and Chelsea next. Even losing against Arsenal, they played pretty well, and they had won 8 of the 10 before that. Is that true? That doesn't sound like it can be true.
They'd won 5 in a row at one point, so it probably is true.
Can I check that?
They lost to Villa. They hadn't lost many other games. They were on a really good run since post Carabao Cup.
So they've won 8 of the last 10. Sorry, yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
Do you want me to pick that up again?
Yeah.
So even losing to Arsenal, they played well. They've won 8 of the last 10, even with that defeat. Longstaff still out with his ankle problem, which Eddie Howe said caused problems with the balance in the midfield. Lascelles Craft also out for them. Leeds without Keeper Sinisterra, Dallas, and Tyler Adams, who I think has been a big miss. It was 0-0 at St James's, but I think Newcastle will win this 2-1.
I've got a feeling Leeds might win. I'm going to go 1-0 to Leeds, a vintage Allardyce performance. Ben?
I'm going to go 1-1.
1-1. Ben, you've got Manchester United against Wolves at the Paul Ince derby.
Back-to-back away defeats at Brighton and West Ham see Manchester United drop crucial points in the race to the top 4 finish. And then now sit just 1 point and 1 place above informed Liverpool, albeit having played one fewer game than the Reds. United will certainly welcome return to Old Trafford this weekend. Eric Ten Hag remains without key centre-back Lisandro Martinez. There is hope that defensive partner Rafael Varane can return to action this month. Donny van der Beek, Scott McTominay, Tom Heaton and Phil Jones all remain absent for the hosts. Wolves are now safe from relegation following their 1-0 win over Aston Villa last weekend and can play with freedom for the final weeks of the season. Home advantage has been key for Julian Lopetegui's side, with their away form abysmal. Indeed, they come to Saturday's trip to United on a 6-game winners run, losing 4 on the road. The visitors remain without trio Sasha Kaladzic, Boubacar Traore, Chiquinho, but have no further absolute concerns out of this one. The visitors won this game last season courtesy of a late João Moutinho goal, but with United dominant at home and Wolves poor on the road, Ten Hag's side should get back to winning ways. And I think United will win this one 2-0.
1-0 to Manchester United. Jonathan?
2-0 to United.
2-0 to United. I've been desperately trying to think of someone who played for Chelsea and Forest whilst you were doing that, Ben, and I've not come up with anything. So Chelsea.
John Terry.
Oh, come on. You know, it was in my head for some reason. Jody Morris was in my head for some reason. Did he play for both as well?
I don't know, maybe.
No, well, Chelsea Forest for you anyway, Jonathan, the John Terry derby.
So after 11 without a win, Forest have now won 2 of the last 3, but notably both of those wins were at home. They've still only taken 6 points away from home all season, and they've lost the last 8 away games in the league. That leaves them 3 points above the relegation zone. They've got Arsenal at home next, and then Palace away. So they really do probably need to get at least 1 win away from home out of these last 3 games, unless they can take something against Arsenal. Yeah, they did have that cup win against them recently at home, didn't they? Chelsea ended the run of 6 straight defeats at Bournemouth last week. Slightly fortuitous, maybe. It wasn't the most convincing performance. But that at least ended Frank Lampard's pointless start. Failed to score in 6 of our last 9. Load of injuries. Koulibaly, Mount, Cucurella, James, Chilwell all out for Farners of doubt. Forrest got a load of injuries as well. I think the most significant was probably Nico Williams. It was 1-1 at the City ground, but I think Forest away form means they'll lose this 1-0.
Ben?
I think 2-1 to Chelsea.
2-1 to Chelsea. I'm going to go 1-1 for this one. Palace v Bournemouth is next for you, Ben. The Glen Murray derby. I've got one there.
Oh, nice, straight in. Having secured their Premier League spot for another season, Crystal Palace have taken their foot off the gas a little, winning only 1 of their last 4. They're unbeaten at 3 at Selhurst Park, whereas they look to win the campaign strongly. Roy Hodgson is without pair Nathan Ferguson, James Tompkins, while James McArthur is a doubt for the Eagles. Palace are unbeaten 4 home meetings with Bournemouth winning the last 2, so we'll be confident putting another 3 points on the board here. 3-1 loss to Chelsea last weekend means Bournemouth aren't quite safe just yet, but they are 9 points clear of the relegation zone with 3 games to play. Should be confident playing Premier League football next season. But Bournemouth actually have a decent away record this season and travel to South London on a 3-game winning run. Got there in the end. Gary Neal is without Hamid Traore, Marcus Tavernier, Ryan Fredericks and Junior Stanislas, while Kiefer Moore is pushing to return to fitness in time for Saturday's game. I think this one will end 2-2.
2-2, Jonathan?
1-0 to Palace.
1-0 to Palace. I'm going to go for 1-1. Come up with a late shout for Southampton v Fulham, which is your game, Jonathan. The Ati Naemi derby.
Oh, very good.
Yes.
The goalkeeper, the Finnish goalkeeper.
The Finnish goalkeeper.
Antti Niemi.
Did I say his name? Ati Naemi.
Yeah. I was pretending I knew who you were talking about. I
I thought you genuinely did. Ati Naemi, we call him in Birmingham.
Right, okay. Southampton 8 points adrift with 3 games to go. They have to win this or they get relegated. You look back at this season, Hasenhüttl was sacked on November the 7th when they were 16th. They've taken 12 points from his 14 games in charge. They've taken 12 points from the 21 games since. That Nathan Jones interregnum looks disastrous, but Sellis's record is not great either. 2 wins in 14 under him. They've only taken 9 points from those games. And crucially, they've only taken 3 points from the last 10. Although weirdly, those are coming draws against Manchester United, Tottenham and Arsenal. So against better teams, they seem to do slightly better. Fulham, a 5-3 win against Leicester means they've now won 3 and lost 8 of the last 11. They've got big injury problems. Pereira, Ream, Kazawa all out, Mitrovic suspended. Pero, Salisu, Larios and Belakotchip out for Southampton. It was 2-1 at Craven Cottage. I think Southampton might get another point here, so I'm going to say 1-1, but they'll be relegated.
I'm going to go 3-1 to Fulham. I can't believe Mitrovic is still suspended. He's been out for about 1,000 games. Ben?
I think 2-1 to Fulham.
2-1 to Fulham. Brentford v West Ham, I've got absolutely no derby. I really struggle with Brentford. I really always struggle with players that played for Brentford before.
Side Ben Rama. Come on.
No, but he still plays for West Ham, Ben. So you can't have that. It's not how the game works. I've got nothing for Brentford v West Ham.
Sorry.
It's a tough one, isn't it? Well, let's let Ben do his minute and then we'll try and have a think whilst he does it.
Yeah. Brentford saw a 3-game unbeaten run come to an end at Liverpool last weekend as they fell to a 1-0 defeat at Anfield. Bees have lost just twice on home turf this season and won their only home league meeting with West Ham, getting the better of the Hammers 2-0 in this fixture last season. There was little change on the injury front for Thomas Frank, with Pontus Jansson, Keane Lewis Potter, Thomas Strakosha and Christian Norgard all absent, though the latter pair could be available for the final game of the season. West Ham do take on AZ Alkmaar in the semi-final first leg Europa Conference League meeting tonight, and while not mathematically safe, Hammers sit 7 points clear of the drop zone with 3 games to play and are like to focus their efforts on securing European glory. At the time of record, Gianluca Scamacca and Vladimir Sufala confirmed absentees, while Kurt Zuma should be fit to face Brentford, even if he misses out against AZ. The Hammers have one of the worst away records in the division, picking up 12 points from 17 games, and that's unlikely to change this weekend, with Brentford backing to win 3-1.
I'm going to go for 1-1 again. Jonathan?
1-0 to Brentford.
I've still got nothing for players that play for Brentford and West Ham. Not a jot. Hard one, that one. Everton, Man City for you, Jonathan. I was going to go Julian Lescott, but I don't like him after how he played for Villa. So I'm going to go the Richard Wright derby. Everton v Man City.
Everton, 4th bottom. 2 points clear of relegation zone. That win at Brighton, you feel, was essential for them. Partly because of the manner of it. They suddenly looked a team for whom the shackles are off, that was confidence returning. And it followed a run of 9 games without a win. So what that means is they have taken 17 points from 15 under Dyche. So there has been enough of an improvement there, I think, to justify his appointment. They got Wolves away next, which isn't easy, as we were saying earlier, with Wolves' defensive record at home. And then Bournemouth at home, which is pretty much what you want, I think, if you're in a relegation battle at the end of the season, a team who's already safe. City won 10 in their own league. They should be on track to the title, but you do wonder what sort of side they'll put out, given this between the 2 legs of the Champions League semi-final. But 1 point clear of Arsenal game in hand. It was 1-1 at the Etihad, surprisingly. Everton playing much better now with Calvert-Lewin back. He scored 8 goals in the 4 games since he returned, but I still think City will have enough and they'll win 2-0.
2-0. I'm going to go for 1-0 to Man City. Ben?
3-1 to Man City.
3-1 to Manchester City. Ben, the final game that we're going to look at is Arsenal v Brighton. The best I've been able to come up with here is the Matty Ryan derby.
Nice. I will go back to Brentford West Ham. We could call it the Winston Reid derby.
Winston Reid played for Brentford?
Yeah, he played on loan in 2021.
No memory of that whatsoever. Jonathan, you look confused by the Matty Ryan derby.
No, I'm just sort of feel there must be players from the 80s who played for Arsenal and Brighton.
I can't help with that. But Matty Ryan was the guy. If I'm in doubt, I tend to look for goalkeepers, and that's what I've done there.
That's fair enough. Anyway, back-to-back wins over Chelsea and impressively Newcastle has given Arsenal renewed confidence in their title bid, and they sit just 1 point behind Manchester City, albeit having played a game more. The Gunners do have the 3rd best home record in the division, which bodes well for this must-win game against Brighton. Mikel Arteta has no fresh injury concerns for Sunday's meeting with the Seagulls, with Takeru Tomiyasu, William Saliba and Mohamed El Neni all ruled out. Jakob Kiwior should keep a spot at the back alongside Gabriel at the expense of Rob Holding. Brighton were uncharacteristically poor in their 5-1 warning at the hands of Everton on Monday to dent their top 4 pursuit. Roberto De Zerbi's side do have 2 games in hand on the side, some of the sides above them in the table, but top 6 finish surely the aim now. The Seagulls have one of the best away records in the Premier League this season and have won 3 of their last 4 trips to Arsenal. De Zerbi, however, does have a number of injury concerns and none more so than Sonny March, who may not play again this season. Tariq Lamptey, Jeremy Sarmiento, Jakub Murder, and Adam Lallana miss out for Brighton, while Joel Veltman should return to action next week. I think Arsenal win this one 3-1.
2-1 to Arsenal. Jonathan?
2-1 to Arsenal.
2-1 to Arsenal. Right then, that does us for this week's edition.
Sammy Nelson.
No, nothing.
Left back.
No.
And Liam Brady obviously was manager of Brighton in the early 90s, which I think is what I was initially thinking of, that there was a link there. But
no, I've got
Sammy Nelson.
Nothing. Thank you for interrupting my outro to
no, you're welcome. You're welcome. Anytime I can ruin it.
always appreciate it. So yeah, that's it for this week's edition of the Edge of the Box podcast by WhoScored.com. Make sure you're joining us again next week. Subscribe to the channel with your post notifications on and leave a comment below and give it a like as well if you have enjoyed the podcast. I mean, even if you haven't enjoyed it, give it a like as well, because those kind of things help. As I say, we'll be back next week. Enjoy your weekend, enjoy all the football, and stay safe.